I've had several conversations with people about the role that this COVID-19 pandemic plays in God's plan. Is this the event that ushers in the kingdom and Jesus is going to come any minute? Well, that's the promise. But the biblical perspective is, I think, very important to gather so that we think about it rightly. And also, I think we need to think about maybe what's the perspective in our own life so it leads us to respond in a way that would glorify God. And I think there are several passages, maybe many, that reference last times and end times, but the one I like the best is the one that Jesus describes. He's the one speaking in Mark 13 on the Mount of Olives. He went up there and had a discussion. His disciples sat down, can you imagine this, in a meadow? And Jesus was there to discuss these things with them. And what he said is, in the last times, nation will rise against nation, wars and rumors of wars, kingdom against kingdom. And he also mentioned that there's going to be earthquakes and all kinds of natural disasters. Think of what we've had: fires, a tsunami that wiped out 200,000 people in Indonesia, volcanoes, tornadoes. Imagine that. They're there. So certainly that was in his description as well. But I think my own perspective from my own life, just to give you a piece of it, I remember my parents telling me about the Great Depression when we didn't have enough food to eat, rationed sugar and all kinds of things. And they would speak of that as being the last time. And then World War II and Hitler, that was it. That Jesus was coming. And what about the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki wiping out hundreds of thousands? And the one for me, I knew Jesus was coming, was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, a lot of you aren't old enough to remember that, but Russia, the Soviet Union, was parking missiles in Cuba, 90 miles off our coast. I stood in front of my dad's meat counter and I said, this is it. Jesus is coming. The end of the world is on us. So I think that's my personal perspective. I think that one of the things I thought about is that other pandemics, like the 1919 H1N1 bird flu, 500 million people got sick. There were over 50 million people that died. When the population was that was a third of the population of the world that got this sickness. So that's my perspective, but I wanted to give you an even better, for me, indication of how close we are to the end. And it comes from a passage in 2 Timothy, where in chapter 3, where Paul to Timothy says this, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive. Listen to this list. Doesn't it characterize the last decade or maybe even the last generation? Disobedience to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control. It goes on. Brutal, it says, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. Now, I take that and I look at the world as it was before this pandemic and years before, and I say that definitely means that we're in the last days. So I think that's what that speaks to me. Yes, we are. But I like what Jesus said in the 10th verse of chapter 13 of Mark. He said, first, the gospel must be preached to all nations. I love that. So unless and until that's done, he's not coming. But the next major event is coming. But I think here's the lesson in concluding this. Here's the lesson, for me. People talk about, first of all, interrupt that by saying about returning to normal. I don't want to return to normal. I want to return to what God would have us to do. The moral decay and the political anarchy and the apostasy, I'm done with that. But the first lesson, I think, is to be watchful and sober-minded. 1 Peter 5 tells us that. because your adversary, the devil, roams around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And I also like it at the end of Mark 13, Jesus in verse 9 says, watch. Actually, it's verse 37. Stay awake and remember. So that's the marching order for all of us, I think. For me, certainly. Jesus' return is certain, but nobody knows when. In fact, in that very chapter, Jesus says, nobody knows. Save the Father. It's like, I've put aside my omniscience and waiting for God to say, go get your bride. And so I think that's what it speaks to. And in fact, the Bible ends like this. In the 22nd chapter of Revelation, it says, 3 times, Jesus is speaking with red letters. Surely I come quickly. Surely I come quickly. And then the 3rd time, surely I can come quickly. And it's followed by our prayer, even so, come, Lord Jesus. So our marching orders are to watch. I say to you, Jesus said, and I say it to everyone. That's what he said. Watch. Maybe he's coming today.